Hello, my name is Kathy Bissell. Welcome to the Golf Show 2.0. Today, we're pleased to have someone who is a legend and who worked with a legend. Gary, please introduce our guest.
Once again, she's not talking about me, but that's okay. I ran into this guy literally at the PGA merchandise show in the hallway. He was asking for directions to the media center, which was where I was going. It turns out he's a legend. He's written a book, Hogan's Edge, worked at Ben Hogan Company, Ben Hogan Golf. Jerry Austry, he's written a book about it, and he's been somewhere most of us haven't been, in the behind the walls with Ben Hogan at the Oven in Fort Worth. Jerry, you became vice president of the Hogan Golf Company in '84. How did you get that job? And did Ben interview you for that job, or how did that happen? How did you fall into this position?
Well, my previous experience in golf was with Wilson Sporting Goods. And I met a gentleman there named Pete Petrowski. He worked in the research and development department, and I moved on to be general manager of the Walter Hagen facility, and he went to Ben Hogan. And Wilson was having similar problems with shortage of sales and shutting down plants. So he called me because Hogan was struggling with quality and delivery, and that's my expertise. So he asked me to come down and interview for the VP of manufacturing. Now, this was in 1984. Now, by then, Ben had been out of golf for a long time. I'm not a historian, so I knew the name, but I had no idea who he was, what kind of career he had. I had started playing golf after I left college. They invited me down. I did not interview with Ben, never talked to him. He was never around. I had several dinners. They explained the problem. They couldn't deliver the Apex. They couldn't deliver the Woods, and the sales were going through the roof. And would you come down and take the job? So I would, my Jimmy Stewart is Pete Petrowski. That's how I ended up at the Hogan Company. And I did not meet Ben until after I was there for 3 weeks. But one of the things I used to do, I was taught way back when learning manufacturing, you walk the floor because that's your operation. You can see the beat, you can see the temperament, you can see what's going on in the factory. And once you know the operation, you will immediately see where the delays are. And that's always one thing I relied on. And every place I went, Hogan's name was mentioned. Ben wouldn't like this. Ben wouldn't like that. Ben told us to do it this way. Now, he hadn't been on the floor for 20 years. Yeah. And that was still out there. And then one day the president said, Jerry, it's time for you to meet Ben. But don't ever call him Ben. Refer to him as Mr. Hogan. Okay. So now I've been an athlete all my life. I've watched all the Wilson Golf Tour players, and they're all athletic. And I go walking into his office, and he's 5'8", looked like a wonderful grandpa. And I thought in my mind, how could this guy have done anything? And then I reached my hand out, and he grabbed it. And I thought it was in a vice. I have never been gripped by anybody. And he wished me the best and said, I hope anything you need, come see me. I'll help you. And that's the first time I met him. And that was after 3 weeks at the company. So he was not involved with the process. At that point, he consulted on design. And as you know or don't know, for the first, from 53 to 83, they never made a cavity back club. And as a lot of the major manufacturers way back in the beginning, McGregor and Wilson and Ram, they all made blades. Up until Carson, there was no such animal as a cavity back, and certainly not a casting. So nobody was into that art yet at the major golf levels.
When you're talking with the people on the floor, did you have to kind of work them out of this habit of saying, well, Ben wouldn't like that? Because the quality isn't there that he wants. So did you have to get them to, do you have any one or two run-ins, or did you have to explain the new way this was going to work?
Well, I had 2 run-ins before I was offered the job. And again, there was a cultural thing going on also. I'm from up north. They're
Yeah.
from down south.
Yeah.
Many of the people in management that after I was there for a while recognized they were all from up north. And most of the supervisors and the hourly people were all from down south.
Yeah.
So there was a pleasant acceptance, but they really didn't want you there. And one day I got a call to go to his office, and there was a tray of wood sitting on the table. And I knew I would never ask Ben what's wrong with the club. I came walking in. He said, "Jerry, this is garbage. I thought we hired you because of your quality background. If you keep making products like this, we'll be out of business." I didn't ask him what was wrong. I grabbed the head and said, "I'll fix it." So I went back to my office, called the foreman, called the operator, say, "Tell me what's wrong with this club." Gene Shealy, I'm not sure you know that name. He was the master designer trained by Hogan.
Okay.
So he knew what Hogan liked, didn't like, what parameters of the golf ball and quality were important to the company. So I'd bring him in and say, "Okay, show me what is a quality product in Hogan's eyes, and let's make sure the hourly people know that." So it was never a fight of making a quality product and arguing with Ben what is good or bad. That, above all else, had to be a universal acceptance between the two of us. So that wasn't a fight. The big obstacle would be changing the design, going from a blade to a cavity back, which is
Yes.
completely contradictory to anything
Yes.
he's ever made and the clubs they made for 30 years. And that took some selling after I was president. But I knew Ben was a competitor and didn't like to lose. And a lot of people don't know that Hogan's first attempt to compete against King was the radial iron in 1983. That is the first forged blade they made that wasn't a player's blade. And I have a picture
What was the name of it?
The
What was the
radial.
name of it?
The radial.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me do something here, because you'll see the difference. And that club was introduced in 83, and it sold
Yeah.
30,000 sets a year. But it's
Okay.
not a cavity back.
Right.
Okay. And it's forged. The next club
Yes.
they made was a Magnum, which was a casting, and it fell apart completely. So
Wow.
when we lost money and we were raided by Minstar and they put me in charge, they gave me one direction: turn it around so we can sell it, or we'll get somebody who can.
Yeah.
So my first move was to sit down with Ben and use the old 5 W's that I learned as a quality manager. What happened? Where did it happen? When it happened? Why did it happen? And who's responsible? So I started interviewing anybody in the company. We got a little focus group in Minnesota to talk to customers. And they came back with, we answered the quality question. We answered the price question. We asked them if we could increase sales without changing our product line. And the answer was simply no. We didn't have a metal wood and we didn't have a cavity back.
Okay.
And that was a pretty stark reality, that we now have the answer. We know what the solution is, but we've got to get the plant and Mr. Hogan all to agree that's what we need to make. So that's when I went into his office. I had the radio and a ping. And back at that time, you probably both remember, ping was declared illegal with the score lines. And
Yes.
Mark Malvecchia hit one on the green and it stopped within 6 feet and their sales went through the roof. And I
Yeah.
would sit there because with Ben, There was no side talk. You came in, you stated your issue, you stated
Yeah.
your problem, you asked for your answer. And I sit there and show him the radio and say, you like this club? You like the lines? Would people buy this? I went through about 6 or 7 questions, and he says yes to every one. And I pulled up the ping and said, is this a golf club? No. What's wrong with it? Well, it doesn't look like fine jewelry. The lines are too fat. There's no shaping to it. It's offset wrong. And I said, do you think the customers will buy that? He says, absolutely not. I said, Ben, they're buying it 6-1. And if we don't make something that compete with this, we'll be out of business. Will you help me? Now, I felt I needed that so that when he endorsed it, nobody was taking shots that we're going in a different direction than the previous 30 years, and he would test the product for us. And that's how we came up with, which is what the book's about.
The
That
Edge.
club.
Ah,
And in
but
2 years,
but for a cavity back club, that's a very elegant looking solution.
right. And the cavity back was forged. And at that time,
I
was
play
the
that
only
right now,
one
as a
in the
matter of
industry.
fact.
So that's what we did. And then I asked him, you need to help. You need to be the face of the company. I need you to do some interviews, which he wouldn't do.
Sure.
He wouldn't talk to anybody. And he had a good reason, because people misused the information for their own improvement, not for the company's improvement. And I asked him to do interviews and be in a commercial. And that's when we shot the commercial at Riviera. And I went into his office, a little light story, and not knowing how particular he is, he agreed to do the commercial. And I said, okay, Ben, let me call Shady and set up the commercial early in March. And he said, Jerry, who's going to believe a commercial with brown grass?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the difference between being from the north and being from the south.
Right. Where do you want to go? Augusta, Seminole, and Riviera. Oh, okay. That's easy to do. Augusta turned us down immediately.
Yeah.
Seminole turned us down immediately. And now this was early March. We're getting ready to make the shoot for an April commercial. Riviera was mad at him because they were planning a Hogan celebration of his connection to the course, and he never showed up. So we flew our creative guy out there that spent a week begging him to shoot the commercial. And they finally agreed, and that's where we shot the commercial. And then he did an interview with Golf Shop Operations. You probably remember that, trade magazine. Yes. And then he agreed to do a interview with Golf Magazine to support their 100-year centennial of golf.
I remember that, yeah.
They gave us the whole magazine, and he accompanied me to that event, which was the most miraculous thing I've ever seen in my life, with everybody that was anybody on the stage for the first 100 years of golf. And there was Mr. Hogan, and the only line lined up for autographs were in front of Ben.
Wow.
That's how great a guy he was.
Hey, so, Jerry, can you tell, going back to that infamous, or not infamous, it was famous, but it was infamous because it was so hard to put together. Go back and tell about the actual shoot itself, where I forget, I don't remember what, from the book, what hole, what fairway it was, but they threw some balls down the fairway and wanted him to hit a bunch of shots, and tell everybody what happened next.
Yeah, it was on number 4, which is a par 3.
The famous par 4, the par 3, yeah.
Par 4. And obviously now, I've never been on a shoot, so I'm a rookie. I don't know what's going on. We flew from Fort Worth. The next morning, they wanted us up at 6 o'clock. Ben's 75. And I thought, what are you doing? You should have figured that out. I told him what time we were going to the course, and absolutely knew what was going on. No problem. Seeing the lobby, we had a limousine in the back of the golf course. We had a trailer with a personal assistant. He could go inside. He could relax. There was refreshments there. And we would start out and say, well, Ben, do you want to warm up? And this is one great story. He said, yes, but I'd like to warm up with a wood. Now, at Riviera, number 1 is way up on a hill and goes out into the right. Number 2 goes straight and back around, and in between is a little hitting area. So he goes there with a wood. Now, I've not seen him hit a ball yet. I've been there for 2 years and never saw him hit a ball. And he steps up with a wood, and I'm standing behind him, and he takes a swing, and that ball soars up into the air and draws to the left. He looks over his shoulder. He does that about 5 times. And finally, over his left shoulder, there's a guy on the tee on the hill. The next shot goes out into the right. He sliced it. He finally warmed up. We go over to the 4th hole, and he wants to loosen up with the irons, and we put the ball in the fairway, and he moves him in the rough. Ben, what are you doing? I don't want to destroy the golf course for the members. And then after he warmed up, he hit shots into 4. Now, the thing I was concerned about is they'd hear he's there, and crowds would overwhelm him and get involved in the shoot. But Riviera did a wonderful thing. They told every member, you can bring a guest if you want, but if there's any problem, you will lose your membership. So the gallery was there and very wonderful. And we shot the commercial. And as we were near the end, I noticed Ben look at the crowd, and then he start trying different shots. So he'd hit a low stinger. He'd hit a slice. He'd hit a draw. And I stood behind him, and I thought to myself, this is such a privilege. I get to go on tour. I see these young kids hit balls. I'm standing behind this guy. I cannot tell he's not a tour pro. And he was 75. And I found out later, and there's a picture in the book, Gary, that you've seen, they put a plaque on that hole.
Yes.
Of the only hole that Ben Hogan picked out and the only time his swing was ever shown in a commercial for the company. And it was just a wonderful experience. You saw.
Do we know if that plaque is still there?
Yes. And I'm getting ready to go out there and do one of my book signings. I have a 54-slide PowerPoint program magnifying what's in the book. As you know, when you have pictures in the book, they're not big enough to really.
They're little,
Yeah, so you can't get the impact of the pictures at the Centennial, and we're working with the Riviera people to come and do that, to show them the result of what happened in '87. So that was a marvelous.
Wonderful. They'll enjoy that.
They will.
They really
and
will.
So that was when I showed that commercial. I've done several book signings. I did one at the Trophy Club, which is one of the clubs he built. We were at a dinner meeting, and there was clanging of the glasses, and I thought, boy, this is a mistake. Nobody's paying any attention. And then I put the interview on. Absolute silence in the room. Not a glass, a whisper, and that's the commercial we showed in 1987. So I have the original commercial we shot.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
I show that, and then the book goes through the sale. And of course, while we were doing this, they're bringing people in to buy the company. So we had to show what we were doing and show we're working on an edge, and these people were competitors. Now you can imagine my staff knowing that, am I going to be here tomorrow?
Yeah.
What's going to happen if they sell the company? Is any of this we're doing now going to matter? Or are they just going to drop the bomb on us? So it was quite an emotional period of time. And with Ben's help and pulling everybody together in one direction, that's the only way we could have pulled it off, because everybody was trying to save the company and build them back up. And we went from 50 million when I took the company over to 90 million in 2.5 years.
Good job.
With that,
That's not easy.
So, and one of the reasons I went to the show was to meet with Simon. You've talked with him, haven't you, Gary? He's
Yes.
the one that's bringing
Simon
the Hogan,
Millington of the
right,
golf
and
brands that owns the Hogan name now.
right.
Oh,
And
yes.
I'm trying to get him to understand the legacy is as important as the product. So
Yes.
we're looking at putting the book on his website. And then I've got one thing I'd like to show you both. One of the greatest
Sure.
promotions I ever did, one of my first trips. Now, understand, I had no marketing or sales background when I took this job. The only reason I got the job is because I controlled most of the expenses in the company at the time where they needed to clean it up. So I went to one of the Opens in 1986, and I was with I'll just take 1 second. Back then, the Opens, you had like a little mini PGA booth where you'd walk through, and on each side there'd be Ping and there'd be Wilson and Yonex.
Okay.
They'd all have their products out before you open the door to go to the golf course. And usually as it opened, it's cold, it's wintry, and they're going to have coats on and they're going to have beanies on. So I'm feeling pretty good. And I opened the doors, and every place you looked, every place you pointed a camera was a Ping beanie.
Oh.
And I went absolutely crazy. How did they do that? Well, Karsten, sharp as he is, gave away the beanies as a promotion.
Yeah.
And I looked at our UK distributor and I said, I'm going to be back next week or next year. And if this weather is the same and I don't see one of these, you're fired. On my line, and we couldn't keep it in stock.
Wow.
And we gave it away at promotions, and we also had the 1-iron as a promotion. I'm sure you're familiar with that. It's behind me here. You see that? I don't know if you can see that.
Oh,
Okay.
Oh yeah, there's the photo.
yes. The famous picture.
Yes, and of course Hogan owns the rights to that. So we got a small poster and a large poster, and depending on the size of the order you placed, you would get a small poster or a 26 by 38 to hang in your pro shop. So I'm trying to entice Simon to do that with his promotion to bring that brand back, and that was also
what's there to entice? Those are both so obvious.
Well,
I want that ski hat right now.
Well, sometimes
people
be
making those.
Think they have their own answers. They don't use the 5 W's, Gary.
Yeah,
I've always been taught if you follow the 5 W's and you find out what's wrong and who has the responsibility to fix it, you'll always solve the problem. But
we need to send you to Boeing, I think.
Yes.
We need to send you to the Boeing company.
Well, maybe they just matter not spending money.
I imagine they got a lot of that going on. It's not my fault, and you don't get things corrected when it's not your fault.
That's correct.
So that's been my experience. And as I look back on it now, I wish I would have appreciated it when I was going through it to realize what an incredible man Ben Hogan is in his life story and what he accomplished from where he came from. It's just unbelievable.
I used to work for a guy who knew him from Fort Worth, and he would have been maybe a generation or a half a generation younger than Hogan. And they played some professional golf together, and since they both were living in Fort Worth, I guess, would see each other at Colonial and whatnot. But my understanding is that Mr. Hogan was a very kind man, but apparently he was very shy, and he did not like going out in public and talking to a whole bunch of people. But he was a stand-up
That's
person.
true, Kathy. Go ahead.
And everybody thought the world of him. That's all I've gotten out of.
One of the things that he did at the Centennial, and I appreciate it now that I'm 83. I didn't appreciate it when I was 47. That he knew he couldn't play golf to the standard he wanted to play golf. And at the Centennial, they had a tournament with all of the people that were there. And Ben had remarked some of them shouldn't have been playing. But we went and played with Johnny Miller in our foursome with my executives. And I left another close friend of mine to watch him to make sure you protected him from the news media. And he decided he wanted to go to the golf course. So he got in a limousine, drove to the golf course by himself with Joe Kelly. That's in the book, and there's a couple pictures in the book. And he signed autographs for 2 hours, all by himself, visiting at the golf course and enjoying the afternoon. So when he felt comfortable, when he felt that he knew the circumstance, and I can understand that, he wasn't, he was more an introvert than an outgoing person. And a lot of people, as the stories go, have called him for advice. He would give the advice and then they'd use it to make money. And so that's one of the reasons he told me he wouldn't do interviews, because he didn't know the purpose that they wanted the information that he would be giving them. Now, when he knew who you were, and he, like in my case, he knew I was going to abuse him, but for the company, he knew exactly what our purpose was. So he was very comfortable with the interviews. And I have that golf shop operations interview looking back 30 years ago, the questions they asked him and how he answered them. But I couldn't buy that advertising with both those magazines that gave us like 10 or 12,000 reprints that we passed out at the pro shop. That's the kind of impact he had.
Well, you may remember when they started the Ben Hogan Tour, which became the Nike Tour, now is the Korn Ferry. When they had the initial press conference launching that, he was there, and he took some questions, and somebody asked him, you know, Mr. Hogan, do you have any advice for these young players today? And he thought about it for a minute. He said, yes, watch out for buses. Oh my God, the place went up for grabs because everyone's walking on eggshells because he's there. And he goes ahead and he drops a nuclear bomb like that. So when I used to cover Colonial in the 90s, I'd see him in a cart. He'd be driving around, parking the trees in the shade.
Yep.
He'd watch them, watch some guys play. He'd go around. I'm not going to go. First of all, he didn't want to have a media guy come over, and I'm sure he didn't know me, but even so, it's like he's watching golf. I'm not going to disturb him, but I saw him in the trees a number of times. So that was my interaction with him. Well, the book is the Hogan Edge. Jerry Austry helped create that. And this is just a few of the great stories from the book.
Yeah, and I'm proud to say that at Amazon, it's now at 4.7 with over 100 reviews. So I've been pushing that and trying to get the story out. And there's a couple of stories in there of his first meeting of Ichutani. He bought the company that I was sitting next to him when he remarked. But speaking of the Hogan Tour, I think when you read the book, that's one of the reasons I point to that killed the company, because of the cost involved in that and the expense of that, when that didn't create one club sale.
Yeah.
That created some, and of course, that's a wonderful thing for the golf tour, because the competition, as you know, Gary, is with the Korn Ferry and all the feeder systems now, the talent level trying to get to the top is just incredible. They can keep playing and their skills keep developing. So And that's one of the issues I had with the new owners. They wanted to spend their money doing that instead of promoting the products. And I knew if you added $10 million to the bottom line of expense, wouldn't it take very long for
That's a lot
me
of
to
golf
be
clubs
gone.
to sell.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a lot of golf clubs. So
Well, you can
But,
find the book on Amazon.com. Jerry Austry, a legend, wrote a book about another legend. Thanks for joining us today, Jerry. Thanks for telling us those stories. That was great.
Well,
Glad I met you.
thank you very much. And it's great talking with both of you.